like it's about 3 p.m. So we will get started with the City Council Budget Work Session agenda for Tuesday, January 7th, 2020. And I think we are happy to see everybody here, and thanks for being a part. We see a lot of staff who will be giving us reports today, so thanks for being here, and also to the public. We're going to start with you, Jeff.
Well, we have first on our agenda a general discussion of the budget proposal. So this is an opportunity for council to ask any other questions that you maybe didn't think to ask on Saturday, or if you all want to have some conversations about some of the recommendations in the budget that you heard from us on Saturday. Now's the time that you can do that. If there's not a desire and there's not sufficient topics for you to cover, then staff is ready to go through the capital plan when you're ready.
I know that many of the all of the councilors have received Jeff's memo with the 4 items that we wanted him to report back on. And so if any of those items, maybe we can go through it one by one and just discuss them as a council, because these are things that we requested you to follow up on.
Sure.
Okay.
You want to
All right,
walk
we'll
us
do
through
it.
those? Okay.
We'll start with number 1, aid to agency funding. And I know that HCDC Commission requested a meeting with us. Has anything been set up with that, or a proposed date?
No, we were looking first to you to make sure that you wanted to have that meeting.
Okay.
Assuming that you do, we would work with them. I think ideally it maybe could occur at your next work session, the regularly scheduled work session. If that doesn't work for HCDC members, we're going to probably have to poll you individually and try to find a special meeting.
Okay. I think at the last budget meeting, what I suggested to councilors is that we actually wait to have the meeting with HCDC before, so that we can gather all their information, get their input verbally before maybe we go into great discussion on this item, but it's up to the councilors what they would like to do. Personally, I thought we got a census of the councilors wanting a meeting with HCDC.
Yeah, I would like to have that meeting.
That's what I recall.
Okay, so we'll aim for January, was that 21st, your next meeting? I think I said 17th in here. It's January 21st we'll aim for. If that doesn't work, we'll look at the next available date.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
The second item that we wanted further report back from staff related to Forest View tenants in relationship to the double wide units and the proposed new Forest View neighborhood. I know that Jeff did submit information in the memo from, I want to say it was August.
Correct, yes. I didn't really provide any new information because there is no new information to share. We did have the request in July from the developer and the Tenants Association to move to double-wide housing units. The estimated cost, and I emphasize estimated because the developers made it clear that they don't have the exact cost yet, was about a little over $20,000 per home for a total of $1.2 million. Staff's recommendation remains the same. We encourage the developers to apply for the existing affordable housing dollars that we allocate every year, and continue to work with the Tenants Association to see how many houses need to be double wide. Is it every house? Is it 50% of the houses, 75% of the houses? But it seemed like there was a little bit more discussion that needs to be had between those two organizations before we could get a firm number. I know that the development team did submit one grant application to the trust fund that was not approved. Despite it not being approved, I think that there would be an appetite for approving that at the trust fund level if the application was strengthened a little bit. So I continue to think that that's a source that needs to be fully explored before the council considers some additional significant financial incentives for this development. If you recall, and the memo mentions this, the Economic Development Committee has previously had some conversations about an infrastructure TIF for the Forest View neighborhood, so that would be for the construction of Forest View Drive and the utilities. That would be the main arterial in that subdivision. Those TIF conversations have stalled over the last few months, but we fully expect that the developer will be pursuing those. So given that that's about a $13 million roadway, the TIF is probably going to be a good portion of that $13 million as contemplated right now. Given that financial involvement in the process, again, that's why we would say let's exhaust some of these other affordable housing funding opportunities before we consider the $1.2 million.
I just want to say that I agree with you. We don't have enough information for this right now, and even though the proposal by the developer was 1.2 million, that's if all the 57 houses, because they said 20,000 per one house and times 57, that's where the 1.2 million come. And my understanding that, as you just said, this is not, we don't know how many houses need to be, will be like by any means less than the amount that they proposed, because not all the houses supposed to be wider, and that's why we really need more information in order to see whether we're going to approve this or disapprove it. We need like really more information. The developer is the one who proposed the 1.2 million. I guess we have to ask them to really send us the real cost for this housing, how many houses. My understanding also, the residents who want the wider house will bunch in some money. Right now, all the houses will be like $310 a month. But if you have a wider home, they are willing to pay more than $310. And this is even will make the one house instead of $20,000 will be less than $20,000. We need all this information in order for the council to make their mind if they want to move forward to this or no, or if there is another fund available for that, and which fund we should take this out from. I agree with you, Jeff, but I hope for next meeting, we have that information, because the developer is the one who proposed that. Now we need really specific information from him so we can make up our mind.
I agree that a very important piece of the information we need is how many we actually would need for the double wide. And I wondered if you talked about the developers, have the tenants association themselves met on their own to determine how many of them would be interested in the double wides, so that we have an idea from them?
I think I'm sure those conversations have taken place, but I'm not aware of a specific number. And I don't think, based on the conversations that we've had with the development team, I don't think they're going to be prepared to give us exact cost estimates before your next meeting. I just don't think we probably won't have it, maybe even before your budget's approved.
I guess the one hope would be is we can still get maybe some more estimates. It doesn't have to be exact. I think one of the things is we can probably consider a line item if the request is still there, just so that we're not, as we've learned in the past, we get, either close to budget season or even the budget has already started and then there's a big ask. I think now is the most appropriate time for us to even consider it, because we are aware that it's been a request on some level. And so if you can navigate that a little bit and find out from the developers a direct ask as well as from the tenant association, that would be my request.
Especially this is 2021, but yet it's not like something, it's not this year or next year, the year after, which is
The 2021 budget starts on July 1st of 2020.
21, yeah.
2020.
2020.
2020.
This
Yeah,
year.
I mean, like,
So-
this is for July budget,
Right.
right?
This year.
Yes.
Yeah, which is 20 July.
I just hope that something can be done with this, because it's been over 3 years, almost 4 years now, that we've been dealing with this development, and we just really have to get moving on it.
Yeah, as a reminder, where we stand right now, the council's approved the rezoning. What needs to happen now is the council has to approve an affordable housing agreement, and that's really something that needs to be worked out between the tenants association and the developer. Those conversations don't appear to be very active right now, and we can do our best to encourage that, but as staff, we cannot speed up the pace of those discussions. It's going to take cooperation on both those parties' part, and again, those conversations aren't very active right now. So we're going to try to keep things moving, but we have limited leverage and ability in this situation.
Do we, Jeff, have any sense of the schedule for this project in terms of actually needing to purchase these homes, having a definitive idea?
No, although I can say based on the need to approve the affordable housing agreement, the presumed need to execute a TIF with the city of Iowa City, the platting process, they are 3-4 months away at best from getting all the approvals. That's a very best case scenario from getting all the approvals they need. And when you think about a development of this nature, there's a good year's worth of infrastructure work that has to take place before you can really get substantial housing and commercial properties built. So I think it's probably very unlikely at this point that we would see a new Forest View neighborhood open up or be ready for occupancy in 2020. I think 2021 would be more realistic.
I think even if they don't have the timeline exactly figured out, it'd be helpful for me to understand if this specific request that was put forward in July is still kind of the issue. If the affordable housing agreement isn't hammered down, nailed out, yet, I would like to know, is this something that's remaining? Are they expecting city action before they move forward? I would hate for us to approve something as unprecedented as this and then be told, well, there's other hurdles or there's additional requests that are going to come forward. So if we can just get some clarification on where this request sits in the context of the larger project moving forward, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was concerned. When do we need to sign off on our commitment or lack of commitment to the housing component, or at least this piece of the housing component?
Just to provide a little more detail, we got a proposed affordable housing agreement from the developer's attorney last spring. We sent extensive comments to them in May and also provided those comments to the Tenants Association, urged them to get counsel of their own, which they did. Their counsel provided comments. We have heard nothing from the developer, nor has the Tenants Association. So there are numerous issues that have to be ironed out before there is going to be an affordable housing agreement. But obviously, without the developer's participation, we can't do that.
So just to clarify what you just said, Eleanor, even if we approved this specific request, that doesn't resolve the issues that you're aware of in that agreement? Okay, thank you.
What was not raised, but in reading through some of the background material, the question of the park was also brought back into my attention. And when do we need to make a decision on that with respect to budget-related issues?
I don't know that there's really any budget implications for this fiscal year. Your budget, I think we can make that down the road if and when it becomes an issue. We've had that request. Staff's recommendation is to keep that private, but if council would like to make it a public park, we can work through that with the developer during those final approval stages. I don't think you need to worry about the budget here. It's a small enough parcel where if we had some maintenance time within this budget period, we'd be able to handle that.
All right, so it sounds like we'll hope for some more information at our next meeting on the 21st.
Okay.
The third item that council wanted more information on, which was presented in the memo, was related to the breakdown of costs for the temporary positions that are not being recommended to shift to permanent status. And so did you want to maybe kind of, Jeff, cover?
I can highlight that again. So this is actually an issue that first came up during last budget session, and council spent a good portion of their meeting time in 2019, breaking down this issue. Ultimately, council has previously converted what equivalates to 4.78 staff positions to permanent status. So these used to be hourly employees, non-benefited employees, and now those duties are in permanent positions. With this budget, staff is requesting the transition of one additional FTE in our housing authority. So with your approval, that would get us to 5.78 FTEs that have been or will be converted from temporary non-benefited status to permanent benefited status. During the 2019 discussion, we offered the council a whole list of positions that we felt would qualify for permanent status. The remaining 4 positions are listed in that memo that I provided you that's in your late handouts. There's a senior center video specialist, there's library maintenance aide, maintenance worker 1, library maintenance custodian, and the recreational customer service aides. What we did is we provided you the cost of that, the estimated cost of that conversion, and then per council's request, we broke that between salary and benefits to give you an idea of what could be paid with the employee benefits levy. So the employee benefits levy can cover the benefit expense. It cannot cover the salary expense. That has to be a general fund commitment of dollars. So you can see the total cost down there is $430,000 to make those remaining conversions. We did give strong consideration to those during our budget preparation process as staff. Ultimately, we prioritized the hiring of new permanent positions, which we covered on Saturday.
I'm the one who requested that, but what I really want to say about this, salary-wise, this will cost us like almost $200,000, but benefit-wise, this will cost us like $240,000 almost, which is going to be from the benefit levy, and that could be like, I think, for less than 5 cents if you add it to the employee benefit levy, if I'm correct.
We did run that calc, and it was 5.7 cents for the benefit portion.
Because if 1 cent is 50.
It was between 40 and 50. It was about 42,000.
Okay. Yes, and now we're reducing the tax levy in general by 6 cents. And I think the priority of the council is not to reduce taxes. It is one of the priority, but if we're reducing last year we reduced the employee benefit levy by 10 cents, and this year, no, not 10 cents actually. 10 cents, and you increase it this year 10 cents, like we get it back 10 cents. And right now we're reducing the overall tax 6 cents. I think if we add like 5 cents to that, and we're reducing by 1 cent the tax, or maybe we can just not reduce it, like leave it as it is for the public. The public want to see reduction; they don't like to see increasing. Or if their bill like stayed the same, still no. I don't think people will start getting mad because we're paying our employees benefit. This is 5 cents additional to the employee benefit levy, and the 190, it is easy to get it from the budget. I really think that we already know some of the employees. We moved them to, we done like 4 positions, I think, or 3, Jeff. I guess 3 or 4.
That we already converted?
Yes, they already converted.
It's 4.78.
4.7, and all the people who are, when we start talking about this, all the employees who are hourly, they knew about what happened, that we moved some position to become permanent, and we said, we need to bring the rest of them back to the council during budget time. And now all those employees are looking forward. I just had a meeting yesterday with employees from the, some like rec center and some employees like from, I talked to 2 of them from the, a different department, and I find out those people, they work there for 3-4 years. and they never get benefit, and they would like to continue working there. And if people like to continue working for the city, they told me that their hours sometime become more hours when students are not here and become less hours when students are here. And those people are single mom who have children. I have also people who graduated and they still working there. They start working there when they was students and all this kind of thing. I just feel like we need, since we moved 4.7 and the other people are waiting, since we did it for some employees, we have to do it for everyone. And hopefully the council will support that. This is not going to be a lot of money from the budget because we are proposing to reduce the tax levy for, and we can just add it and still reduce it by less than 1 cent or something like that. But I really encourage we do this, and it's up to the rest.
I guess one question I have is, can we see what it would cost just as an estimate? I'm not exactly sure what all positions are being requested from temporary to permanent.
They're listed here in the memo.
Oh,
The
okay.
4 positions right there.
Yeah, so
Those are the
these.
people.
Okay,
This is the cost of the salary, cost of the benefit.
okay, all right. All right. I thought there were some additional people that you were referring to.
No, I'm referring to those, I guess, the people, the new hire, the 9 point something, it is already being budgeted on the budget, my understanding, right?
It's in the
The new
proposed
hire.
budget.
Yes, it's already from the proposed budget. But those is not being budgeted.
Yeah, if I
That-
could clarify one thing, this is not an exhaustive list of our hourly employees. We have a lot more hourly positions than you see here. We went through an exercise last year. We sat down with AFSCME and we tried to identify the hourly positions that are held year-round and have a, let's say, we kind of use 20 hours per week as a benchmark. Some of these are a little less than that. But we looked at those positions and we felt that those were the best candidates for conversion to permanent status. But again, we have a lot of hourly employees that you don't see on this list. And that's what, when you're raising the minimum wage, that's who you're helping. You're helping those hourly employees who are making that wage, because all our permanent employees already make well above even $17 an hour.
I guess we're going to continue have hourly employee. I'm not going to that. The city need hourly employee. We have seasonals, sometimes we hire more people during certain season. We still want to want that. But those people, as me said last time, this is the people that they really work in the average of 20 hours or less, average of 20 hours, I mean. That's why we need to do it. People who work around the years and being with the city for a long time, they call themselves city employees, but they are not getting some benefit. And I know there is many, many more hours employee. We can continue have those as long as they are not working as those one. Just the best, the candidate to prepare.
What are other counselors thinking?
Well, one question I would have for Jeff would be, Jeff, if you were to prioritize the positions, those 4 positions that were not funded in your proposal, would you have any priority? If we were to fund these positions, is there any priority within those 4 that you would have?
I think probably 2 answers to that question. One, if my first priority would be hire additional permanent staff and not convert, because I think we're going to continue to get more value for the public by looking at adding staff in key positions and even within these operations, senior center, library, and parks and recreation. I think the city would benefit more from hiring additional permanent staff in these areas and keeping these temporary. Set that aside, and if your goal is strictly to move the temporary to permanent status, I think the biggest bang for your buck is in the recreation customer service. It's also the most expensive, but there would be value. There would be value to doing that. I want to remind you, though, that there's also going to be in that particular position a number of hourly employees that don't have a job after this process, because we probably employ 20 to 30 hourly employees to meet that demand right now. And what we're saying is we would have 7 full-time equivalents. So that doesn't necessarily mean 7 full-time employees. We might have some half-time employees in there. But some of those current hourly employees would no longer have a job after this process.
Yeah, there is many students work there and they leave anyway during summertime and come back. For the rec center, I don't know, the rec center person is here, you are here, but I went there and I asked how many people work during this time, and this time I find out there is less employee during summer, which is they get more hours. And when the student, you constantly hiring again when the students come back. We just, we can just stop. If this is going to start on July, we can just start not hiring during the summertime and keep those employees. And even if the council would like to move only one position this time and leave the rest for another time, I really encourage you to do the recreation center. Those people on the front desk, they are the people who greeting the resident of Iowa City every day, just to make somebody staying there all the time and the same face, not changing. There is many problemms happen sometimes at the rec center because the people don't know other people and they act like, when you get somebody there and they understand the job, they being there for a long time, and I think this have a value to the rec center. I really encourage you, even if you don't want to think about all of them. You want to do it gradually, like every year you're going to do some people permanent. You should have started with the rec center. And I was really hoping this to happen during the 4 positions that we approved. That should have been one of them because we have more people there.
Being new to this process, I think for me, what I come back to is kind of the balance overall. And I agree with taxpayers may not have the expectation that their taxes go down, but what we know with this budget proposal is there were assessments last year that I think on average went up 9%. And so even with lowering the levy, we know that people's tax bills are going to go up a very small amount, and so I'm sensitive to that. And I think the recommendation, as I understand it from staff, is to phase it in. We did the 4.8 to start with. There's an additional one in this budget, and then adding those new permanent staff, which I agree with what Jeff said. I think that's our priority. I'm very concerned with the idea of people losing their jobs based on this conversion. I think when we add new positions, then we have the opportunity to give people jobs where they know what to expect from the beginning. But this would be individuals who were hired with one understanding, then losing their job because of this conversion. So I'm not supportive of that.
I'm also new to this. One of my concerns, though, is looking at the overall budget, limited funds that we have, and looking at departments such as the fire department, which has an enormous increase in calls, but is getting, at this point, no increase in staffing, which is something of a concern. And so there's a balance in there that we have to strike. I don't know where the right place is, but I think that if we're going to look at either converting positions or adding positions, we need to look at the full universe.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation. I think, we're getting the tax levy down 6 cents, and as Laura said, people's taxes, people don't pay attention to what the levy is. A lot of people don't understand the different pieces of the city and the county and the school district. They're looking at the bottom line is what they're looking at, and I think that is a real struggle for a lot of people in the community. A lot of our low and moderate income people who do happen to be homeowners struggle with that piece in terms of the extent of the property taxes. And I do agree with Jeff in terms of kind of where we get the biggest bang for our buck, if you will, in terms of permanent full-time staff. We started back in probably early 2011, not too long after Tom Marcus got here as city manager, looking at the whole staffing of the city, and over, I don't know how many year period, through attrition of all but 2 positions, we decreased the permanent full-time city staff by almost 40 people, maybe 38 or 39 people. And there was a lot of different reasons, but a lot of overlap and different things, and there was a lot of reorganization that happened as well. But when we also then look at the growth in our population in the last, say, 8 years, from 2010 to 2018, it's clear that we need to now start building back up very strategically that permanent full-time staff. And as we've talked lots of times about projects not getting done in the time frame that we would like to see, a lot of that's because our staff just doesn't have the capacity to do that. And so I would prefer to see the prioritization as staff has recommended with those permanent full-time, and still make that effort to reduce the tax levy as presented by the 6% and hold these off for a little bit further down the road.
This is a real serious balancing act. I do think we've, in terms of, the compensation for our city employees, we've made great advancements in terms of the hourly, moving incrementally toward 15. And I tend to be an incrementalist on this thing, that the impacts of it financially are extended over a certain period of time. So I am supportive of moving these other positions, but I do kind of want to view it as something that's done over a couple of budget seasons rather than just one. And just in terms of some of the things I've tried to initiate, I am sensitive to the fact that in some cases, I've been kind of, the staff response has been, John, we just don't have the staff time to do that. And so I'm feeling that is where there needs to be a better balance struck. And I hope my goal has always been, partly because I think it's fairly broad in its scope, is to try to keep everything advancing and maintain movement on all fronts. And in this case, it's, with new staff, transitioning some of the temporaries, together as a kind of incremental expansion.
I liked how Laura described it as phasing it in. I think John kind of alluded to that, too, that obviously I believe that personnel budget should be a priority for the city. I mean, those are our most valuable members of our staff, providing the services out there for the community and all the departments. I think Janice mentioned the fire department, and I've heard from them that a priority would be more staff. But I think one thing I've noticed you've done with a lot of these positions, as well as that, is kind of shuffling things around. Like they did get some help with the limiting the inspections aspect of it and putting that in the NDS. So that's helpful to them as far as perhaps putting more of their employees out onto the streets or on their vehicles. So I think the other thing that concerns me is what will happen with the transit study. I think that before we delve into adding so many positions and bumping so many of them up, we need to see what comes out of that study. If it indeed means more routes and more employees, more drivers, somebody can correct me, but I think for the most part, a lot of the transit drivers are full-time. Perhaps some of them are maybe part-time. I'm not sure if anybody can clarify that, but.
There's a blend.
A blend, okay, all right.
Quarter-time staff and full-time staff.
So
But
three-quarter time and full-time, just so it's in the record.
Three-quarter and full, so that could mean a lot. So I think we need to keep that in our minds, and because it is in the horizon that we'll find out about that. So I think that you've done a good job of blending some of the positions so far, and we can certainly keep it in mind. But I don't like the domino effect. I'm also concerned about the domino effect and that some persons might potentially lose their jobs, and that's certainly not the intent.
One of the things that Janice said is looking at all of, the staff, as a whole, the city staff as a whole. Pauline just mentioned, we had the transportation study coming. When I've talked to ASME in the past, their priorities shift, within what they are thinking are the needs of the community. or the needs of the staff. So we know that there's 42 individuals, if I recall correctly, that department heads requested for additional staff or somewhere related to that. So I think before I make a lot of statements, I would first want to see with AFSCME, are these still some of the thoughts for their priorities? And then have a conversation from there. I would agree that whatever the outcome of maybe that reassessment is that we consider that, and we do try to phase in something, and we'll consider what their priorities are right now. They may come and say, counselors, these are important, don't get me wrong, but we have something that's so important right now that we need to address because this department is really hanging on by strings. They're overworked, and there's whatever the case may be, not to kind of create this fear, but that would be my request, is that we this has been a while. We know that priorities change. Give this back to AFSCME, ask them what are their priorities at this point. Definitely look at that, and then maybe we can consider, because what I hear personally from all the counselors is from most of the counselors is that we may consider an additional something related to staffing, because we know that there are a lot of needs out there. And we want to phase something in. We don't want, and even Susan talked about, we need to start planning for, some more permanent staff, and maybe we can do that a little bit now, potentially, and get something in this budget season so that we can move forward and really feel good about having an initial investment in the increase in our staff.
Can I make a couple of points on that? One, first of all, you should rely on me to help you understand the staffing needs. It's certainly okay to have AFSCME weigh in. AFSCME is a union that represents some of our employees. We have two other unions. We have non-unionized staff, and you have a team of management employees that have really good perspectives on what the needs are in their operations. So I would encourage you, if you want to get a better picture of what the staffing needs are, work through our office. Let us develop in conjunction with the management team of all the departments, what the ideal staffing levels are in every department. It's going to be well beyond the 42 positions that we considered for this budget. And we can present that to you, and then you can have the police union, the fire union, AFSCME, the general public, the non-unionized staff, whoever weigh in on that. And yes, you may get some disagreements where a union member may say, we don't need this position really, we need this position. But I'd be careful asking a union or any subgroup of employees to develop a staffing plan. That's really why you employ me and why we have the management team in place here. The other thing is, I would say, what our thought process has been through this whole property tax reform transition that we've been in is one of pace. We've had to pace ourselves because we know if we overextended ourselves on expenses and we weren't getting the growth to make up for the tax-based loss that we're experiencing with this reform, we're going to be in a situation where you have to cut. And we've really tried hard to avoid a situation in which we have to have any conversations about cutting, because as we talked about on Saturday, when it comes down to cutting operations, most of the time you're going to be talking about cutting staff. So we've done really well. And as you can see with this budget, especially those of you that have been on the council a number of years, you haven't seen these types of staffing recommendations from us and certainly in my 8 or 9 years here. This is the first time we've been fairly aggressive with asking for new staff, but we still have a bit of nervousness about us, and we talked on Saturday about that 2024 cliff, we called it on the slide, where the multifamily could drop 5-10% down, and we might see a sharp loss in tax revenue. So we're not out of those woods yet. What I would encourage you is just, if you want the staffing plan, we'll present it, but you have to exercise some caution. Otherwise, if you move too fast, you could find yourself in a couple years having to dial back, and that's about as painful as a process as you can imagine.
And just to summarize, Jeff, for my education, there had not been staffing additions for a number of years. Is that right?
In the last couple of years, we've added one or two. We've added,
Okay.
a couple of streets employees. We've added a police employee or two, but it's very, very incremental. With these 9 new positions, that far exceeds what we've done in the last few years.
So 9.25 new positions and the 5.78, I think you said, of the conversion. So a total of about 15 full-time equivalent, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So I think that's, to your point, Bruce, of phasing in that staff expansion, to me, that seems like a significant move in the right direction if we quantify it that way.
And I have to say that, definitely, given the history that this is, definitely doing what Council wanted is to increase some of the staffing. I will retract and at least, asking ASME to be the determinant factor on what we do. I think my correct language should have been, give it to the city manager, and then the city manager, of course, talk to all of the individuals that have interest, such as ASME, and I know that they will weigh in with some of their priorities as well.
I guess my only additional comment to that, Bruce, was that was done. I mean, that the city manager's office worked with AFSCME from that whole hourly list, as I recall, to narrow it down to like 22 positions, something like that, and decide which were the most important. We approved the 4+ that we've already done. We've got the 1 being added, and then these are some that remain from that. So that was just done a few months ago. So I don't particularly see a need to be trying to go back. My sense of what I'm hearing is that there's a majority here that is supportive of the plan as presented by the city manager in terms of the recommendations on the hourly to permanent part-time. Is that, we've been talking about this for 40 minutes, and I guess I would just be curious if we do have the majority that feel that way, that we move on.
I just want to add about ASME. I remember when first we had this, I was advocating for it. And Susan, if I remember correctly, you read a letter from ASME. They saying that you understood from that letter they are not in support of this. And you guys said, oh, ASME even is not support of this, and we didn't even move on it until later when ASME come back and said, no, you understood our letter wrong, and we start doing this all over again, and we come to this idea. We are not saying that ASME should determine who's people supposed to work here over the city council. That's by any means is not the one that what I aiming to. But I just believe that we start the process of converting the hourly employee, to permanent employee, and we convert some of them. People are watching, looking for the converting of the rest. We said clearly last time we need to do this during the budget time. I understand that maybe all this will be a lot, and we can, I like the idea to phasing in, see which one is really important. But of course, if there is no support or something like that, but I just want to highlight that ASME is not the one that got determined this, but we asked them to see, because I knew from them some of those positions used to be permanent, and they convert it. They make it hourly after that. I think you know that too, Pauline. There is some of the hourly employee currently used to be a permanent position, but they make it hourly. I don't know why they did it long time ago, but if we needed to have it back, and they cut down employees during that time, then this is practice being happening.
I think that's what Susan maybe touched on that as far as the history of that and when those positions were changed. And I think, Susan, maybe you can help me clarify this too, that letter from ASME, which I saw, and I also had spoken to them. I don't think it was that they didn't approve of this. I think they just were expressing their concerns, and some of which had been mentioned, the potential loss of jobs, the potential reclassification of the positions, different requirements like language barriers and things like that. So I think that the letter was more expressing the current concerns. I do not think that it actually said that they did not approve or agree with the plan. Right.
That what it mean. Like you guys understood it. Like there's gonna be a lot of loss of job. This is maybe is not a good idea to happen. But when they come over and qualify to us, that the way that we understood it was wrong. That's what I mean. I don't mean like anything else.
So I know that
But
Susan.
we don't have to talk about this too much if somebody's not.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Susan did just make mention that as far as like what the city manager has suggested, so far we are in agreement with. I think the question really became from Maz, like, let us just really think about the levy, because the levy pays the benefits, and, you know, the full cost isn't the full cost because of the levy. And so, what are people's thoughts as of right now? Because I think, of course, I did hear that people wanted to, work on increasing staff on some level, but it has been pointed out, and I'm happy that Laura brought that out, that, again, this is 9 positions that, is kind of in that increase in the staff. Do we feel, I know we all feel good about that. Do we want to, say to Jeff, Jeff, just take our comments that you've heard today and just come back to us? Or do we want to just leave the budget as it is?
I would say leave the budget as it is. I guess I'm not, if I were sitting in Jeff's seat, I'm not sure what you would be telling him to take our comments and then come back to us.
Okay.
I really think that we just at least to approve one position, saying that's will be, as Laura said earlier, maybe the people want to see like less taxes. We're still going to be reducing the tax by 3 cents, and we can, do it instead of 6 cents, and we still have maybe at least the recreation centers having full-time position approved, and leave the rest for next year budget or. Just like that, just to visit it. As if,
I would point out that one of the positions that was just proposed in this budget comes off this list.
Right.
So that if we're looking at an incremental approach, we did some in the last year, we added one in this budget from that list, as well as the 9 or so new FTEs that are proposed. So I would be supportive of the budget as it stands right now.
Yeah, I'm okay again with the way it was proposed, and I think it is useful for me to think of it as, as Jeff said, the departments have asked for a lot more than they got too. So in a way, we're trying to move, the way I'm trying to view this is we're moving everything forward. No one's getting everything they want, but everyone's getting something. And that's kind of the way I've been viewing it.
I agree, and I think we are moving in the right direction, and thank you, Mazahir, for bringing this up at the last budget session and encouraging staff to look at their staffing levels and see where it could be changed or where things could be shuffled around. So, because I think that was very helpful and started the discussion, which needed to be done.
So I do hear it clear. Let's leave things as they are with this budget. But I think we are all very conscientious of, the need to have our city manager really do look at in the future, looking at the temporary to convert them over to permanent on some level, as well as some of those positions that have been requested that we weren't able to fill. So. All right, we'll move on to number 4. And number 4 is the local option sales tax. And right now, staff is recommending that we place this conversation on hold, and let's have it at a future meeting. Anyone not in agreement with that want to say something right now?
Nope, it's fine.
All right. So we should probably transition to clarification of agenda items for today in the formal meeting. And just for the knowledge of the new counselors, typically we will focus in on some of the consent items and discuss some of those, the other items that are, that we'll be voting on or talking about. We'll, of course, at the time of the meeting, discuss those. So clarification of agenda items at this time. The one thing I did want to mention is Angie Jordan's report from the South District. It takes a village meeting, is what it was called, and it was a data collection. The good thing, I did attend one of the meetings, and the way that this meeting derived was because there were business owners that reached out to the South District to kind of talk about some of the negative choices that was happening within their establishments. And rather than calling the police, the businesses wanted to gather people together just to talk about the behaviors and to just collect some data and try to figure out what are ways that we can, as a community, kind of change these behaviors. And so it's really the data collection. There's going to be more meetings to follow. So I would encourage counselors. I do know that there is a meeting. The South District meets once monthly. There is a meeting tomorrow. I would encourage counselors, if they're able to, maybe tap into some of those meetings or at least read some of the emails that we get from the South District after their meetings, read some of their meeting minutes.
7A.
Oh, go ahead.
7A for the, yes, I know that the staff respond for Richard's table for Langenberg Avenue, but at this point, is this like we have to respond or also?
No.
When I read the letter, I don't know what we should do about this.
Yeah, Dr. Stapleton reached out to staff directly too, so we corresponded outside of this. So he has been responded to, and actually I think, I don't know if Kent's not here anymore, but the transportation planners are looking at a particular site distance issue that he has with the stop sign out there. And I think I've given you some background overall on Langdenberg. I mean, there's a long, long history of some traffic concerns there. We really feel like we've done about everything we can from a calming standpoint, given what's built out there. But we do remain in communication with him and some other neighbors out there.
I did just want to make state for the record that I was referring to item 7B, the Angie Jordan It Takes a Village report.
And I was also going to refer to that and thank Angie for including that in our packet. Some very helpful information in there, and I think it's meaningful because it came from the folks that attended the meeting and their ideas and their suggestions. And I think there were many items in there that we as a council can encourage and support and keep in mind as we go along and make decisions about things. Particularly, there was comment about making their voices matter and inclusiveness, and I think we always have that in mind. But there was also a lot of reference to the school district, and I see Charlie out there in the audience, and I'm encouraged by him being on the school district board, and confident that he will speak up about the issues that were raised in this report and that relate to the school district. So thank you, Charlie, ahead of time.
If nothing else for the formal agenda, then we'll switch over to info packet, December 19th. Kelly, do we need to figure out KXIC radio show?
No, I'll do another memo here when it gets towards the end of the month.
Okay, awesome. If there's nothing for December 19th, we'll switch over to January 2nd, info packet. The one thing that we do have to do, you'll see list, we need to talk about pending work sessions. As is typical that once we transition and have a new council, essentially that we review some of the pending items just to make sure that this is what we want to move forward with as a new council.
Yeah, and then just a little bit more information. Typically, what happens at the beginning of a year, particularly after an election, is this pending list will grow really quickly once you start having some strategic planning decisions, because that's where kind of the blue sky thinking comes up, big pictures, a lot of requests for additional staff information. So we like to take this time to say, what remaining on this list is really important to you? Let's keep that on. And then what are some things that may not be the highest priority for use of your time? And just looking out, you've committed your next work session to meeting with HCDC, assuming that they're available. And then you can see that we have a couple of conference board meetings coming up. So you're already into February in terms of rationing your already scheduled time for work sessions.
So I wonder if it would be helpful for us just to go through the list real quick and just get some feedback from counselors. So number one, evaluate need for loss. We've already talked about that. So we know we're going to keep that. And then number two, consider a plan for rubberized surfacing at playgrounds and development strategies to address equity gaps noted in the Parks Master Plan and plan for the equitable distribution of destination parks within an easy and safe distance of all residents.
Yeah, that's one that that I raised, and I think the rubberized surfacing seems to have made progress from what I understand through the Parks Commission, but I still do have, and in fact, may be preparing a memo to staff to try to identify some issues that I see as we move forward, which would include this question of equitable distribution of our parks in certain parts of the city as identified by the Parks Master Plan. So I'm still interested in talking about that and seeing with the current council what everyone's thoughts are with respect to how we might accomplish that.
I guess my question, has the Parks and Rec Commission talked about these things specifically? And it would seem to me that would be the place to start, and then for them to come to us with a recommendation.
Yes, they've discussed it, and Julie's prepared to
Okay.
kind of share with you what they
Okay.
talked
Okay.
about.
Then, yeah, I think we ought to hear what they've had to say.
So it sounds like we'll keep that on because there's already been some preparation if people are okay with that. We'll move down to number three, review of staff's growth boundary analysis, Johnson County Fringe Area Agreement update.
That's one that we'll have to do with you.
Okay, so we're going to keep that. And then number four, discuss amending city code to require staff and zone applicants of large-scale developments to consider the effects of the proposed projects on future carbon emissions and absorption capacity, and to take actions that will help achieve the city's carbon emission reduction goals. So that's really related to our climate action emergency. Now, I'm not sure if some of this is all a part of the 100-day report.
Bits and pieces of it. So we identified some policies we want to take a look at in that 100-day report. But I think when this was mentioned by council, you could think of how we've used our racial equity toolkit and basically applying a climate equity lens to all development proposals that come forward. I think as staff, we understand the desire. We know what your values and visions are when it comes to climate action. We're going to do our best to work within that framework as we review things. We'll suggest policy revisions. We're a little hesitant to develop yet another kind of component to a staff report that would come along with every rezoning and every plat that comes before you. So I guess in short, what I'm saying is I think this slowly happens over time as we implement that report. But if you want something more immediate, you probably need to talk about it and let us know exactly what your expectations would be.
I guess me personally, I know that we have the Climate Action Commissioners, and a part of what their task has been is to look at all aspects of what the city does, including large-scale developers, and make some recommendations as to how we can reach our climate action goals. And so, personally, I do believe that this is being met with that Climate Action Commission, but of course, here is very specific to look at large-scale development, and I do believe that it's on their radar, in a huge part of their radar, but that's just me as one commissioner, or one voice here, and that's my sense, is that it would be on their radar for certain.
Well, I think with what you're saying, Bruce, makes sense. If anything, maybe to send a message to them and say, we're taking this off from our pending work list because these are things we want you to take a first look at in your role as a Climate Action Commission. So
That sounds like a good approach.
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, I am interested in the idea, as Jeff, in a sense, suggested, that a kind of a way of assessing projects with respect to their carbon footprint. And, maybe there is a threshold, that we consider in terms of when that kind of assessment would take place. But having some formal way of getting a better idea of what the impacts of a project could conceivably be, I think, especially in our transition phase here, and in the sense that I don't know if we all have a sense of second nature as to what the potential impacts would be. So, yeah, I like the idea. Perhaps the best way of going through it would be through the commission.
I think so.
Okay. Seem like there's a consensus to go that route. Any thoughts from staff?
I was just going to mention that they do have a working group that is dedicated to assessment of building efficiency, and that could expand into this idea of development. At their meeting yesterday, they were very attuned to these cross benefits and cross-cutting issues that pertain to climate action. How does development relate to transportation issues, to equity issues, and those kinds of things? So they're still working on developing what that assessment of those issues and initiatives are, how to approach that, but this could be a good topic for them.
All right, number 5, discuss alcohol usage policies in city parks. And that was one that I put up there. And I think one of the thoughts that I had for putting that on the list is really related to public space. And when you think about where alcohol is outside of people's homes, in the public, it is typically in an establishment where you have to purchase a drink. And so my thought was, in the parks would probably be the most appropriate place where individuals within our community could bring their, while they're having graduations, even retirement parties or whatever the case may be. It is a public space where, it's low cost for them to rent or reserve, sometimes is even free, for them to have the opportunity to have adult beverages in the park. Of course, the public spaces such as the rec centers and that type stuff isn't appropriate or not what I'm recommending at this time, but I would think that maybe we can have further discussions just about having it at some of the city parks, and wondered if there was any support to continue to have this on the list just to talk about it.
I'm just curious where we ended up on that, because I thought we had made some allowances
if I recall
for it.
correctly, we, shortly before the special election, Bruce, but we brought this up, and I think it may have received support on the first 2 readings, and then on the third one, or the second one, council maybe deferred indefinitely or actually voted it down. I can't recall, but there was some concerns and some desire for the city to consult with the Partnership for Alcohol Safety. So we did that between readings, and predictably, the Partnership for Alcohol Safety has concerns for expanding usage of alcohol in parks or public spaces. And I think the council just kind of decided at that point to let the issue go. But we did a whole comparison. It went through the Parks Commission. We provided some comp cities and what cities allow it, what they don't. We had rules on glassware and kegs and hard alcohol. All that stuff was kind of all spelled out at that time.
Essentially, it was a staff proposal to allow use in the shelters, as I recall.
That sounds right. I'm willing to discuss it again. I don't know about others.
Yeah, I'm okay with discussing it.
Okay, so we'll keep that on the list. Number 6, discuss possible challenges to residential zoning classifications to allow and to require a greater diversity of housing types. The missing middle. I see nods, so I would probably say we'll keep that on. Number 7, determine topics for February 11th joint meeting with UISG. And that's going to be coming up, so maybe we should put that on our work session for next meeting? Okay. Number 8, City Conference Board meeting, February 18th.
That's going to happen, yeah.
Yeah. So initiate the 2019-20 strategic planning process, and that's also going to happen. So it does sound like the only one that we are going to remove for now is going to be number 4, and we're asking that this language be transferred over to the Climate Action Commissioners.
Okay.
All right?
That sounds good. I think I want to make sure that we're on the same page. The sooner we can get to strategic planning, the better. I wanted to make sure that you all felt comfortable with the budget process, and I think after you get through your next meeting, you'll have the discussion with HCDC. You'll have some time to think about the information you took in today, identify any other issues. But assuming we can put the budget to rest in late January, early February, we should really have a discussion, probably at your February 4th meeting, about how you want to conduct your strategic planning process. Is that a special meeting off-site? Is that use of your regular work session times? Would you like a facilitator to assist with that? We should really get those plans in place here pretty soon.
And I do want to just point out what we discussed as IP4 and IP5 from the January 2nd packet. And I also want to just make a point just as far as timing for our budget so that it is very clear to counselors what that timeline looks like. So for the max tax rate, it needs to be set by January 28th in order to make the February 4th agenda. After that time, we can still make budget changes, but we cannot raise the tax rate. So that's very important to know. And then all decisions should be made no later than February 18th council meeting. That gives staff the time to prepare the state documents so we can set the public hearing on March 6th and then gain final approval on March 17th. From the January 2nd info packet, there's 2 other things that we did want to talk about, which one, IP7, that is the joint request meeting for HCDC, which we've already talked about, and we'll be having a joint meeting. And then IP6 is the joint entities agenda for the January 13th that's going to be coming up. And so we should probably discuss some topics. I kind of sort of recall that we mentioned having affordable housing presentation request, or just to get their feel. That's what I recall. I don't know if anybody in past council meetings as a topic that we would bring up.
I think it was the Mobile Home Task Force report.
Okay.
Is what council most recently indicated.
Okay.
That it would be good for that commission, or for that
It is
group.
something else.
Yeah.
I just don't remember on top of my head, but I remember we talked about, I guess, some South District.
The South District Form-Based Code was
Yes,
brought up.
the
Yes,
form-based
thank you.
code, and we would like to talk about it to the school district at least, because it might be, when we expand this area, it will be more density, and it might be needed of another school there. We just have to tell them that what we are doing.
Yeah. I think in the school district, Superintendent Murley has reached out to me and indicated a desire to talk about the form-based code. What I've communicated to him is that it's probably a little premature now. I think we want to get the draft regulating plan out there, which is a visual that will help everybody understand and conceptualize exactly what we're talking about. I did share with him the presentation that NDS staff gave the council maybe November, December, just kind of the general update on where we stand. But once we get that regulating plan, I think you'll start to see the layouts of neighborhoods, and you'll have just a much better understanding. The council will, the school district officials will. So my personal opinion is it's probably a little premature for January 13th. But if you want to do it, we can give much the same presentation that you all received in December. I'm just not sure how beneficial that is to that group.
I'd say wait.
Any other suggestions for that joint entities agenda that, as a council, we might want to present? Okay. And that's a quarterly meeting, is that not?
Yes.
Okay, all right. At some point, we may just want to highlight some of our climate action as a city, but we can possibly wait until we actually get that back from the commissioners. Anything else from I2 info packet?
No. I guess I still think that, even though, Jeff, I understand that you're saying this is premature to add it to agenda, but I think just giving them, because sometimes we cannot just we wait until we're ready to implement something, and maybe the school need to do something else in there. But just if we can give them highlight about overall, the same thing that you presented to us. We don't want to, and we can tell them this is premature right now, but that's the thing that we're heading toward that directions. Especially if the superintendent reach out to you.
Yeah, so again, I've given him a copy of the video from that report, and I presume he shared it with folks that have, that he feels need to have that information at the school district. I think, and then I should also say that staff met with the leadership team, Superintendent Murley and his leadership team met to discuss the plan in general, and just city growth in general. If we want to meet sooner, I would suggest that maybe we get a group of staff, and if you want to have a council liaison or two join, it might be better just to be city school district as opposed to bringing in Coralville, North Liberty, Tiffin, Solon, a lot of those smaller towns that may not be impacted as much by what we're doing with our zoning code. I think if we want to share that when it's near completion with that group, they may be able to learn and take some things away, but to share it with that larger group, I'm just not sure there's going to be a whole lot for those other entities to take away. So if the council would like us to follow back up with Superintendent Murley and offer something sooner, we can do that, and you can decide if you want to schedule, a joint meeting with them now or a month or two down the road, or if you just want staff to continue to work with them on that.
I guess as you see, I don't care, but I just wanna want them to know the information. It doesn't matter if now or whatever you see, it's good. Just.
I'll follow up with Superintendent Murley regardless, and just let him know that, I'll let him know my thoughts, that it's still probably a little premature, but if there's an urgency on his end that I'm not appreciating, that we'll make arrangements to get some group of us together to talk.
I think that would be a good idea. We've had joint meetings with them before, and I think, particularly the one when they were talking about the bond, the big bond, we met with them, and I think it turned out to be a very fruitful discussion, so I think it would be helpful.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else from IP2 or January 2nd info packet? All right. So normally at our work sessions, we do have council updates on assigned boards, commissions, and committees. Can we do that now?
No.
It's not listed.
Yes.
How about you do it at the end of the formal? Don't we have an agenda item? That's
Yeah,
council
so we'll
time
do
or
that.
something? You can do that.
Okay. All right. Yep. All right. Be it there anything else for the work session that counselors want to address?
Just thank staff for sitting here through all this. You probably
Yes.
figured, why didn't we get up and leave?
Yes, thank you all so much. Anything else?
Thank you for all the work you do for the budget. This is like really a lot of work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Consider ourselves adjourned.